Hey everybody and welcome back to the channel, and today we are talking about Cloud9's performance in the VCT Americas Playoffs. Cloud9 had one of the best regular seasons of any team in any of the three VCT international leagues, and they went into playoffs being one of the favorites to make it to Masters Tokyo. They only had to win one match, being the second seed. If they just won that one match against Evil Geniuses, they move on to Masters Tokyo and face against probably Loud in that case, if that is the reality that we were living in. They would have faced Loud, and then that would just be playing for placements. But instead of having a very easy path to success, C9 had probably one of the biggest collapses in VCT history so far, and I don't think that that's much of a stretch to say. C9 are in this weird spot where they haven't made it to an international tournament since 2021, and that was Champions, the very last tournament of that year. And then going into 2022, they had high hopes for their roster and had a decent performance, but ended up not qualifying for any of the international tournaments in 2022, losing out to teams like 100 Thieves, The Guard, those teams. And now we have this brand new roster, this brand new franchise league. They were second in it after dropping Ye and Vanity. No one expected them to be as good as they ended up being, but they ended up being the second best team, at least statistically, in the VCT Americas, and looked like possibly the best chance for North America to win an international tournament this year. And then they get to playoffs and they finally get to games that matter, really big games. Like they had their playoffs locked in like halfway through the season. They knew they were going. They didn't really face much adversity during that time, and now we're here, and where does this team go? So looking at the regular season record, they were 8-1. Again, second in standings, right behind Loud. Apparently in terms of ELO, they were technically above Loud, but that's not what the league goes off of, so they ended up being in second. Maps were 16-7, rounds were 261-215 for plus 46 round differential. Looking at their maps, they had one of the more impressive performances on Lotus, going 5-0. They won every time they played on it. Attack win percentage was 77%, defense win percentage was 57%, so very good stats there on that map. And then Fracture, which they played 3 times, they again went undefeated with a 59% attack win percentage and a 65% defense win percentage, looking very good there. They also had a perfect record on Split, but they did not play Split in the playoffs, so I didn't put it on the board. And one of the main key points that I want to showcase in this video is I want to talk about Leaf. Now, I'm not pinning the blame on Leaf for the losses, but he did not perform up to snuff and nowhere near the quality that he performed in the regular season he carried over to the playoffs. He was not the same player. He just looked lost at times, and teams just knew how to shut him down. And as soon as they shut down Leaf, the rest of Cloud9 just couldn't make up for it. But his regular season record, as I said, was very, very impressive. He had 387 kills, 309 deaths, 120 assists for plus 78. His KD ratio was a 1.25, which was one of the best in the league. And by average combat score per map, I didn't put it on this slide here, but he was second in the entire league, right behind Aspas. So statistically, he was the second best player in the entire VCT Americas. So while a team that they dropped their superstar in Ye, Leaf looks like he could actually be that superstar that they were kind of missing in terms of what the roster was looking like coming into the season. People knew that Leaf was really good, but Leaf didn't have like a fantastic 2022. He had some really solid performances, don't get me wrong. He had a good 2021, and he looked like a very, very good D-list player, but maybe not a player that you would consider in like the top 5 players in North America. Maybe top 10, you could have made that argument, but this year he proved that he absolutely is in that top 5 conversation, and he was maybe potentially pushing his way into the conversation of best in the world. Not saying that that's what I believe, just saying that you can look at the stats and you can make that argument. Unfortunately, we get to the playoffs and he just disappeared, and we'll get to a stat line a bit later, but I want to go through the actual playoff matches that this team went through and what went so wrong. So looking at their very first match of the playoffs, which was against Evil Geniuses, this was an absolute choke job. This was just a terrible map by Cloud9 through and through, and something that I'm kind of really disappointed in Cloud9 for how they performed here. Now, granted, Evil Geniuses did go on to perform really well against Loud, and then they just lost to Energy today, but they didn't look terrible that match. They did lose 3-1, but they were a team that was on a hot streak and coming into the playoffs as one of the underdogs. And those teams can be dangerous a lot of time, and maybe Cloud9 did the same thing that Energy did, which was completely underestimate them and not come in prepared. Even if they lost this game and they made the maps close, like maybe like a 13-10 score, 13-11, something around that would be excusable. And I wouldn't say that this is as much of a collapse as I'm saying today. But looking at the scoreline, this is downright embarrassing. Again, Evil Geniuses were performing very well. Cloud9 was performing better, and they looked much better coming into these playoffs. And then this is the scoreline that you put up. Cloud9 should have won this match. 100%. Evil Geniuses, super proud of them and the run that they went on in these playoffs. But Cloud9 100% should have won this match, and they didn't. They didn't even win more than 7 rounds. Fracture, which is one of the maps that they went undefeated on in the regular season, they lost 5-13. They only won 3 rounds in a row in the first half, and then they couldn't pick up any streak for rounds and just won 2 more after that, and then they're done. And then their bind was even more embarrassing. 2-13 match. Like, that's downright terrible. That's horrible. I don't care how good EG was playing that map. You cannot be a team with that record in the regular season, 8-1, and perform like that. You have to at least make it tough for them, at least make it hard for them. But Evil Geniuses just steamroll through them. Looking at the stats, Zeppa had an average combat score of 210. His kills were 20, deaths were 29, assists were 11 for -9. Not really good there, but he was their best player. And then we had zellsis, who went 16, 27, and 5 with -11 and an average combat score of 142. Again, really not very good. Jakey looking invisible. He had 13 kills, 29 deaths, 14 assists for -16 and an average combat score of 128. The aforementioned Leaf had 15 kills, 30 deaths, 7 assists for -15, and an average combat score of 142. Rooney, their IGL, so this is at least kind of excusable, went 13, 32, and 9 for -19, so really not good numbers there. I mean, I know he's an IGL, and a lot of IGLs die a lot and don't have a ton of kills, but like, -19, that's not good. And an average combat score of 139, again, really not good there. They just got absolutely smacked this entire match, and Evil Geniuses just looked like they were like better than Loud at that point. Like, they were just destroying Cloud9 in just every possible way, and just Cloud9 just couldn't get anything going. So that sent them down to the lower bracket where they had to face Leviathan. Now, Leviathan, they did win this match, and this was a much more winnable game, so thank God they did. But even in this match, they had their struggles. First map of this match was Haven, where they won that one 13-8, so looking like they had at least recovered a little bit from that very poor performance against Evil Geniuses. And then they get to Lotus, which is the map that in the regular season they were undefeated on, going 5-0. Their map pick, they lose 13-10. So now we've seen both maps that they were very good on, they have a poor performance on and lose. At least for the Lotus one for Leviathan, they at least won 10 rounds out of that. But that's your map pick. And if you're one of the best teams in the world, you have to perform better on what is your better map, especially if it's your map pick, especially with how well they've done on that map this season. Thankfully, for the third map, Ascent, they did recover, and they did take it that one 13-4 in what seemed like a more Cloud9-esque game. Stats for that one, Jakey led the pack with 51 kills, 42 deaths, 23 assists for +9, average combat score of 239. zellsis, big game for him, 39, 36, and 18 for +3, average combat score of 176. Zeppa with a better game, but still not fantastic, 42, 44, and 28 for -2, average combat score of 190. Leaf, better game, but we still see him on the lower half of the scoreboard, and he didn't have a positive kill-death differential, going 42, 42, and 13. So he went 0 in his plus-minus there, average combat score of 204. So I like a little bit of a recovery, but not nearly as good as he needs to be for this team. Rooney went 43, 40, and 15 for +3, 204 average combat score. So a pretty decent game from him there. And then we get to the one that happened yesterday, which is Cloud9 versus Energy. I mean, they gave it their all. They didn't have a terrible performance on this, and Energy is very good at rematches, so coming into this playoffs, hoping to face Cloud9, they were much more prepared than they were in the regular season, but this was a lower bracket game, and Cloud9 just couldn't close it out. And Energy, as an Energy fan, that match was tough to watch, because, like, They gave Cloud9 every opportunity to win this one. First map went in favor of Cloud9, going 13-10 on Pearl. So pretty close match, but Cloud9 did have much better streaks in terms of rounds won than Energy did. Energy didn't get more than 2 in a row, and they had at least 4 in a row. So solid performance from them there. But then we get back to Lotus. Cloud9's map pick. They lose again. They were undefeated on this map during the regular season, and they lost 9-13. They couldn't even break 10 rounds on it like they did against Leviathan. This is your map pick. Why are you performing like this on your map pick? Energy just figured out how to beat them, and just Cloud9 could not adjust in the way that they needed to. They won 3 rounds in a row. Aside from that, they won 2 at most. Like, it just wasn't good. And you look at Energy scoreline, 4 in a row, 3 in a row, 2 in a row, 2 in a row, 2 in a row. Much better, and they locked it down, and that, I felt like that was Energy's experience coming through. They have a very experienced veteran esport player team, and Cloud9, while they do have some of that, and they do have experience on their lineup, especially with zellsis, Leaf has experience too, Zeppa as well, it just didn't come through, and they just could not match Energy's strategies, and they couldn't adapt like Energy did when they came into this. But as I said before, Energy gave them every chance to win this one, because on the last map on Haven, this one went to overtime. And this was a much better map for Leaf, especially early on, but it just wasn't enough, and it was too little too late, and overtime Energy wins both matches, and Cloud9 is out of VCT Americas Playoffs, and they will not be attending VCT Masters Tokyo. They can still win LCQ and go to Champions. That's still a possibility, but that's months away. This is now. Right now, Cloud9 just had an absolutely insane collapse. I'm pretty sure they were the only second seed in all 3 VCT leagues that didn't make it to Tokyo. They should have made it. It should have happened, but it just didn't. Looking at their stats for that match against Energy, zellsis, really big game from him. He was their best player by far. 52, 41, and 20 for plus 11. The only player on the team with a positive kill-death differential. Leaf, as I said, had a better game, but still ended up negative. He went 56, 57, and 13 for -1, and an average combat score of 233. So better average combat score, he looked better. It just wasn't enough. And as I said, it was just too little too late. And on the first 2 maps, he wasn't very good. But then the 3rd map, he had a much better one, and that's where a lot of these numbers come from. But it just wasn't there. Zeppa went 47, 50, and 17 for -3, average combat score of 191. Jakey went 43, 46, and 12 for -3, an average combat score of 176. Rooney, also an average combat score of 176, and he went 40, 49, and 18 for -9. Right down below me is their map and rounds record in these playoffs. They won 3 maps, they lost 5. They won 77 rounds and lost 88 for -11. And as I said, they lost both games on Lotus. They won 5 rounds on Fracture total, and that was the very first map of these playoffs. They didn't get to play that map again, so maybe they would have recovered if they had played that map. We'll never know. And losing how they did on Fracture, can't have that. Can't have that for a team that is in 2nd place, that looks like one of the best teams in the world. Then looking at Leaf's playoff stats, in total, he had 113 kills, 129 deaths, 33 assists for -16. So going from plus 78 in the regular season to -16 in the playoffs, can't have that. You just can't if you're Cloud9. He's their best player. He looked like a superstar during the regular season. Where was that guy? He wasn't here for these playoffs. His KD ratio was 0.87, so really not good there. And in terms of kill-death differential, he was positive on 2 maps. 2 maps out of 8 in these entire playoffs. Now they're out. And again, I don't want to blame the playoff losses on Leaf, but when you don't have your best player playing at his best, you need the rest of the team to either make up for that or to find a way to help him. But these teams, they learned how to shut Leaf down. Even Leviathan, like, he didn't have a great game versus them either. It's just really frustrating because this is a team that coming in the season really desperately wanted to be in an international tournament. And, you know, they proved people wrong, and they came into playoffs looking like they were going to be, you know, one of the best teams in the entire world, and they just couldn't do it. They had to win one match at the start. If they beat Evil Geniuses, they can lose the other 2, and we would still be having like the conversation of, oh, are they one of the best teams in the world? Are they going to win Tokyo? But they lost that match, and then they had to win 2 to get into Tokyo, and they lost both of those against teams that, on paper, they should be able to beat. So they're going into the LCQ, which will happen after Masters Tokyo, to determine the last teams that get into champions. Currently, they are 7-3 in the LCQ, with combining both the 2021 LCQ and 2022. But they did lose to 100 Thieves in 2022, and they will probably have a pretty good chance of facing 100 Thieves in that LCQ tournament, because 100 Thieves there as well, looking to bounce back from what was a terrible end to the season from them. You know, they can bounce back and they can potentially be in champions. It was just such a collapse from this team that it just makes me kind of question this roster going forward. Part of the reason why dropping Ye was a bad idea in my eyes is because Ye is a superstar. Is he inconsistent? Yes. Has he done great on Disguised? Not entirely, but that's also a really bad team. There are certain players that, you know, they go from tier 1 to tier 2 and they just don't mesh as well with the tier 2 scene. I don't think that necessarily means that he's now just suddenly a bad player. I think if he was still playing in the franchise league, he'd be doing fine. Maybe not at the very top, but he'd be fine. But you try to make up for losing Ye with having Leaf, who, I mean, I don't really think those two players should have, like, been on the same team to begin with. I think signing Ye in the first place was a questionable decision role-wise, because they already had Leaf, who can play Jet. But I don't know if Leaf is a superstar. I think he can be, and I think he proved that he absolutely can get to that upper echelon. But when the games matter most, he flops. He's flopped here. He's flopped before, and he can't. He just can't, because I don't know if this team is deep enough for him to have a bad performance in these big games. zellsis, he's a big game player. He's had some really good performances in some really important games. He's not enough. He just isn't. And neither is Zeppa. Jakey, he's good, but he is a complementary piece. Rooney is a good IGL, and I think he did a fantastic job coming into this team as a very new player. But he got outplayed. He got absolutely outplayed by almost every other IGL. He lost an IGL battle against Boostio and against Finesse, which two very good IGLs, so fair enough, but still. So I feel really bad for these players. I feel really bad for the Cloud9 fans, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles right now, and they're kind of starting to feel like Fnatic. You know, Fnatic, every international tournament, they came in looking like the best team in the whole world. Like, I saw on the Valorant competitive Reddit, right before every single tournament, is Fnatic the best team in the world? And I was like, let's wait till they win a tournament. And it just took them so long to win a tournament. And then they finally did at Lockett, and now they look like the best team in the world, having the only undefeated record. But before that, it just seemed like they just could not get that tournament win, and didn't seem like it would ever happen. And then they finally did it. It's starting to feel like that with Cloud9, but at least Fnatic made it to the international tournaments. Cloud9, their wall that they can't break through is making the tournaments themselves. Like, they can do fine in North America. They can wipe the floor with a lot of teams during regular seasons and during matches that aren't as high stakes as matches later on and in playoffs, but they just can't close out those big matches, and that's going to come back and haunt them. I don't know if I like their chances in LCQ as much as I maybe should. So we'll see. We'll see how this team does. I think they can absolutely bounce back. Will they? Yet to be seen, but this team has some soul searching to do, and they got to figure out a way to break through. At the end of the day, they did not make it, and they're going to have to live with that until LCQ. So that's all for today. Thank you guys very much for watching. Please click like and subscribe if you really liked this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.